Roger Monroe Allen was born September 28, 1900 in Oglesby, Texas. Roger was born in the aftermath of the Galveston hurricane, which occurred September the 8th, 1900. It was the worst national disaster in U.S. history. Roger's mother, Addie, and her mother, Mary Frances, and Harry Leon's family were living somewhere in that area. Lynn had left for Oklahoma to homestead sometime earlier. Roy had moved the family further away and upland. When the hurricane hit, it washed Addie and Mary Frances out of the house. Addie said when she came to, there were boards stacked all around her, and she had a broken arm. Lynn was on the trail in Oklahoma when he saw Mary Frances's brother. He told him what had happened in Galveston and that Addie was hurt. Lynn headed back to Galveston. I don't know if he made it before Roger was born. When Addie and Roger were able to travel, Lynn loaded them up along with Mary Frances, Addie's mother, Roy, his parents, Eugene and Bessie, and they all went to Oklahoma. Harry, Leon, and Addie filed on a homestead, 160 acres, in Rome, Oklahoma Territory. Roger spent most of his early years with his grandmother, Bessie Allen. Our grandmother, Addie, stated that Bessie took him without her permission. All of Roger's siblings said grandmother Bessie had only one grandchild, and that was Roger. Roger married Lola Grace Lacey in November 1922. They left Oklahoma and moved to Texas, from there to New Mexico, and then on to Oregon, back to New Mexico, and then on to Idaho, where they lived out the rest of their lives. Roger was a farmer for most of his life, and then a heavy equipment operator. Roger and Lola had 5 daughters and 4 sons. The sons were Troy, Bill, Joe, and Roger Jr. The eldest son, Troy, was born January 16, 1924, and he died September 13, 2006. Troy worked most of his life as a heavy equipment operator, mostly on highway building. Troy married Eula Mae Mace, and they had 3 daughters and no sons. Troy was a good older brother. He was a good example and tried to give direction to his younger siblings. Roger Monroe Allen Jr. was born September 29, 1945. He has 1 daughter and no sons. Okay. Roger works in the oil business. He's a drilling superintendent for a company owned by Ross Perot. He has worked all over the world. He is now working in Iraq. He now lives in Belle Verde, Texas. So now it's up to Joe and Bill to continue to carry on the Allen bloodline. Joe Wesley Allen was born December 16, 1941. Joe was in the Air Force for several years. Then he worked in Alaska at Prudhoe Bay as an instrument fitter. Then went back to school and became an accountant. He spent his last working years at Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. Joe married Carol McNeese. They had one daughter and one son, Joe Wesley Jr. Joe Wesley Jr. was born November the 11th, 1961. He works as an IT guy and lives in Sacramento, California. Joe Jr. had 2 daughters and no sons, so it now falls to Bill Allen to carry on the line. Billy James Allen was born April 6, 1937. He started working when he was about 15 years old. He first worked as a pipe fitter and then moved up to a welder. He worked all over the lower 48 and then moved to Alaska in 1968. He worked as a welder. Then he had a chance to own his own small construction company. The company quickly grew to become a large worldwide construction company. He sold the company in 2007. Bill married Doris June Mace. They had 2 daughters and one son, Mark James. Bill now lives in Roswell, New Mexico. He's retired and enjoying his time with his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, and horse racing with Mark, and collecting old vintage cars and restoring them. Mark James Allen was born October the 23rd, 1958. Mark's in the horse racing business. He raises and trains racehorses. He also races. He lives in a beautiful ranch in Roswell, New Mexico called the Double Eagle Ranch. Mark won the Kentucky Derby in 2009 with his horse, Mine That Bird. Bill and Mark owned a famous racehorse from Oklahoma. The horse was Easy Jet. It was Easy Jet's last years, but he still produced a good number of good racehorses for them. They buried Easy Jet on Walter Merrick's place in Sayre, Oklahoma. Easy Jet was inducted into the AQHA Hall of Fame in 1993. Mark was married and had one daughter, Ashley, and one son, Quentin James. Quentin James Allen was born September 29th, 1990. Quentin works with Mark on the ranch with the horses and with his grandpa Bill restoring old cars. Quentin has one son, is Quentin James Allen II, born November 1st, 2008. This is a picture of the 4 generations of the Allens. There's Bill, Mark, Quentin, and Quentin James II. Bill's blessed with 3 descendants to continue the Allen bloodline, 2 grandsons, Quentin James and Landon Alexander, 1 great-grandson, Quentin James II. Landon Alexander Allen was born October the 25th, 1978. He's the son of Bill's daughter, Tammy. She was married to a man last name Kerrigan. When she divorced Kerrigan, she took back her maiden name of Allen, and all her children changed their name back to Allen. So, Landon Alexander Allen has the Allen blood and the Allen name. I have received this information from several sources: memories from my father and mother, Aunt Bernice Phillips, Aunt Hazel Kimsey, and pictures from Doug Dwayne Allen and Steele and Odine Kimsey. I believe this information is correct, and this is how I determined from sometime in the 1700s to 2012, and a span of 9 generations, and 33 potential Allen males, it comes down to these 3 people to continue the Allen line.